Welcome back. Washington cleaning house. The IRS reportedly set to lay off roughly 6,000 employees today, targeting recent hires made by the Biden administration. The Department of Homeland Security says it is saving $50 million after firing 400 probationary employees. The Pentagon sending lists of the military's probationary employees to DOGE as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth orders senior military leaders to find 8% in cuts to offset Trump's desired budget. DOGE, meanwhile, found more than $230 million in cuts at the Social Security Administration. Elon Musk now says DOGE could audit all the money the U.S. has sent to Ukraine. President Trump said this.
The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed. They get their money back. It's a form of a loan. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money that we sent them is missing. They don't know where the money is. He said, well, we don't know where half of it is.
President Trump also backing a plan to pass DOGE savings onto taxpayers. Joining me now is Texas Congressman Pat Fallon. He's the chairman of the House Subcommittee on Military Personnel. Congressman, thanks very much for being here. What is your take on these cuts coming to the Defense Department?
Well, I think we have to really look at cuts, Maria, across all federal agencies, including the military, because the Pentagon, no one's ever accused them of operating at maximum efficiency either. We certainly want to make sure we have funding for our troops and that their pay is commensurate with what they would get in the private sector. And also any new weapon systems, we have to make sure that they're funded. But, you know, administrative costs and things of that nature, we can look at cuts. And some civilian employees that, you know, maybe are excess. There's certainly those to be found, those cuts to be found as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you all are trying to get the defense spending numbers up in the reconciliation package. And you are also hearing President Trump talk about things like modernizing the military and coming up with an Iron Dome type situation for America. And yet, on the other hand, you're cutting. And trying to cut out the waste. Congressman, you sent a letter to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, urging them to make U.S. bases in Eastern Europe permanent. You said America's presence in the region will deter Russia, China, and other adversaries. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, and just back to your other point, too, Maria, we're looking for more beef in the military and want to cut the fat. And as far as the Eastern European bases go, we need to deter Russia. And it's also very handy to pre-position troops and supplies and equipment in Europe, because if there's something even in the Middle East that were to kick off, it's good to have those supplies. You'd rather have them in Eastern Europe than in Nebraska, for instance. And also, it does act as a deterrent, because NATO, with Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all, is a deterrent. But it also puts some teeth in it if we have those troops in Romania and Bulgaria and in Poland. And I would even look at beefing up our presence in the Baltic states.
So beefing up our presence means what? Sending more troops?
Yes, more troops, more equipment, more supplies, because we're not going to threaten Russia with, say, 5,000 troops in the Baltic states. You're not going to launch an invasion of a major country with 5,000 nuclear weapons. It's merely defensive, and it's obviously defensive. And it's telling Russia, look, we want to peacefully coexist. We always have. But, you know, you're the one that invaded a sovereign nation and launched the largest military operation Europe's seen since World War II.
Right. So you think this will act as a deterrent to our adversaries?
I certainly think so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've got all of these Chinese nationals snooping around military bases. What's that about?
Well, okay, so you look at the numbers with the Biden administration and President Trump's first administration. There were about, given the year, 2,000 to 5,000 Chinese nationals who had crossed the southern border illegally under President Trump. That number ballooned to 54,000 one year under Joe Biden. And you're trying to tell me that all 54,000 of the Chinese nationals, not one of them is loyal to Beijing? Of course there's some sleeper agents. And that should be of grave concern to us, because if something were to happen, if they cross the Taiwanese Straits, is our national infrastructure threatened? Or is our reservoirs threatened by trained operatives? I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why President Trump won, because people wanted that border to be secured.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you've got Chinese nationals who were caught in our military bases, and you know, in several different places over the last several years under the Biden administration. This is not exactly a touristy thing to do. Go to a U.S. military base, right? So what are they doing? And are they being directed by Xi Jinping?
I personally think so.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're not, they weren't there just taking pictures with the family when they're in
Exactly.
sensitive military installations and have no reason to be there. There's no other tourists around. These aren't tourist attractions. So clearly the preponderance of the evidence is yes, they were snooping around and spying for Beijing. And in an open society, I understand it's challenging. It's a lot harder for us to gather intelligence in China because it's an authoritarian state. So, but President Trump is committed to keeping Americans safe, where Joe Biden stuck his head in the sand and took the ostrich approach.
Well, it's incredible what DOGE is finding out. And this latest bombshell revelation is that the DOGE agency exposed a shocking level of federal spending abuse, with the government having 4.6 million active credit cards in circulation, processing a staggering $90 million in transactions. $1 billion. That's just fiscal 2024. Some of those credit cards were at the Defense Department.
Mm-hmm. Well, look at we found out the news broke about the $59 million for the FEMA spending money on luxury hotels for illegal immigrants. What I loved is that this administration already canceled 29 DEI contracts that the Department of Education had signed, saving $101 million, and then $185 million over at HHS for administrative costs. And one of them was the National Institute of Health has a museum, and they were going to have a Fauci exhibit. That got canceled. And then what the heck are the federal government giving money to the New York Times and the AP? And NASA canceled $500,000 worth of subscriptions from Politico.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of savings to be had out there, Maria.
Well, it's just incredible to me that, the Department of Defense having 2.5 million individual accounts and all these credit cards. President Trump signed another executive order stopping all federal benefits for illegal immigrants, directing those agencies to identify and cancel programs providing them. Trump threw support behind the House's budget resolution plan, once again pushing for the big, beautiful bill. The Senate, though, is preparing its vote on its own two-part budget plan later today. That prioritizes the money for the border security and defense, but does not include the tax cuts, Congressman. Where are you on this? And do you worry that if, in fact, you all go down the route of two plans, that you don't get to the tax cuts before year end?
Well, that's why I think the president is correct in the one big, beautiful bill, as he says, is we need to extend those tax cuts. And you know what? The private sector needs security and they need stability so they can plan. There's trillions of dollars sitting on the sidelines. We need that invested because that will grow revenue for the federal government. And that's terribly important for our economy moving forward.
All right, Congressman, we'll be watching your work. Thanks so much for being here this morning.